to South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio's live broadcast coverage of the governor's 2019 State of the State address. I'm Gavin Jackson. In just a few moments, Governor Henry McMaster will walk into the State House of Representatives here in the State House in Columbia. He'll be addressing a joint assembly of lawmakers, both House and Senators, and he'll lay out his 2019 legislative agenda. Now, this might sound familiar to a couple folks who have already heard his inaugural address, which we heard earlier this month, and when he rolled out his executive budget last week. But we expect him to give more details about his top proposals and how they'll affect South Carolinians. And he's just about to walk into the State House chamber now. For our viewers who are watching, we're going to hear an announcement from the Sergeant at Arms announcing his arrival shortly. But what we can tell you is that we're going to hear several of McMaster's top priorities, one of which will be education reform. If you've been following the news, you know this is a huge priority for lawmakers and the governor. And what's interesting to note is that lawmakers and the governor are in sync on a lot of these top priorities when it comes to reform, such as 5% teacher pay raises across the board and getting SROs in schools for school protection. Another interesting thing that was in Governor McMaster's budget was about $2 million for mental health counselors, in every school across the county and the state. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets received. But we do know that there are plenty to talk about when it comes to reforms. But we do know that we're going to actually hear the governor right now. We're going to hear Sergeant at Arms introduce him to the House chamber right now. We'll stand by for that right now. The House about to introduce the governor. As you can see, there's a lot of lawmakers in there. There's about 170 lawmakers. You get your 46 senators and your 124 House members. So they're all kind of getting in position right there, waiting for the Sergeant at Arms to introduce the governor before the joint assembly. You can actually see Chief Justice Donald Beatty. Now they're gaveling in.
Sergeant.
Our Honorable Governor and his escort committee has arrived.
Members of the Joint Assembly, please rise to receive His Excellency, the Governor, and his distinguished escort committee.
The governor is entering the State House chamber now with his escort committee, which is made up of several lawmakers. And, you know, this is not the governor's first time giving a State of the State. It is his first time since being elected to his first full term. That happened in November. You'll recall that he gave his first State of the State in 2018. Now, the governor did become the governor after the former governor, Nikki Haley, was appointed and confirmed to become the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations in early 2017, but she still gave a State of the State that year. Now, what's unique about this year is that he was elected to a first full term, so he is laying out his priorities and how he wants to accomplish these things. And so far from what we've been hearing from lawmakers, legislative leaders, is that he's in pretty good lockstep with not only Republicans who control the House and the Senate, but Democrats as well. So it's still very early in the legislative session. We just gavelled in to the new two-year session in early January. So there's still a lot that needs to be done. But right now, it's a good sign to see that House, Senate, and the governor are all very much on the same page when it comes to these legislative priorities, which we're going to hear him talk about tonight. Now, we expect the speech to go for about 45 minutes, and after that, we will hear Senator John Scott of Columbia, who's a Democrat, deliver the Democratic message, and then following that, we'll have lawmakers giving their reaction. So right now, he's on the dais in the House of Representatives. He's being greeted by House Speaker Jay Lucas and Senate President Harvey Peeler of Gaffney. Now, that's a new position that Peeler's in as Senate President. That position used to be occupied by the Lieutenant Governor. I think we're about to get this program underway right now.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Joint Assembly and honored guests, I am proud to present to you the Honorable Henry McMaster, the Governor of South Carolina.
Okay. Y'all, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for being here tonight. Those in this magnificent building as well as those watching from afar. I can promise you there's not any place on earth that I would rather be than right here, right now, with you. I promise. One reason is because I am proud of the state of South Carolina. And I'm also proud of my family. For those of you who may not have met him, let me introduce some of my family. My wife, Peggy, and my son, Henry, and his wife, Virginia, up. If y'all will please stand and be recognized. Thank you. Y'all, thank you. Our daughter, Mary Rogers, is not here tonight. She is watching from New York with her fiance, Samuel Martin Herskovitz. The big date, March 16th. Write it down. We have. 1 year ago, I observed here that we were at the dawn of a new prosperity, that our future would be even better than our past. Tonight, as we all know, that is true. The state of our state is strong and getting even stronger. We live in a land of opportunity, and over the generations, we have built institutions of opportunity for the people of our state. Our goals today must be to reinvigorate and accelerate those institutions and rededicate ourselves to achieving the prosperity which can be ours. We have a strong state because we are a strong people. Strong people. A family, a state, a nation is only as strong as its people. Our strength is an economic issue and also an issue of national security. In a rapidly changing world, a highly competitive and dangerous world, we must be constantly making our people strong, educated, trained, healthy, happy. As I speak tonight, I'd like to recognize a few people, a few of our strong people, leaders who have made a difference in our lives. Some are here, some are not. I start with the 6 in uniform who lost their lives while protecting ours. Deputy Shannon Dale Hallman of the Saluda County Sheriff's Office. Deputy James L. Kirk, Jr. of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant Terrence F. Caraway of the Florence Police Department. Deputy Farrah B. Turner of the Florence County Sheriff's Office. Assistant Fire Chief Dennis Charles Strait of the Charlotte Road Van Wyck Volunteer Fire Department in Lancaster County. And Sergeant First Class Christopher A. Salise, United States Army, lost his life in Paktia Province, Afghanistan, in support of Operation Freedom's Sentinel. To the families and loved ones of these men and women, on behalf of all South Carolinians, we send you love, admiration, and strength, and we thank you for your loved ones' service and sacrifice. You are in our prayers. I'd also like to thank Dr. Harris Pastides, who is retiring after 10 years of remarkable leadership and accomplishment at the University of South Carolina. And he's with us tonight with his wife, Patricia. Will you please stand and be recognized, Dr. and Ms. Pastides? Not with us tonight is Dr. Andrew Sue, whom we welcome as the new president of the College of Charleston. He has called this position his American dream. And also I'd like to congratulate Clemson University on winning their 3rd national championship. In many different ways, all of these men and women have added to the strength and prosperity of our state. I have one brand new face for you tonight, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott of Travelers Rest with her husband David and their son Jackson. Thank you, Pamela, for accepting the call to serve our fellow citizens. Pamela, please stand and be recognized. And David. Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, I can promise you that South Carolina is red hot. Our agricultural base is accelerating, our tourism industry is thriving, and we have become a major high-tech manufacturing hub in this country. South Carolina is the nation's top exporter of tires and of completed automobiles. Our average annual manufacturing employment growth is 16%, which is the highest in the Southeast. Over and over, we are recognized as one of the best places in the country to do business and to visit or vacation. In the last 2 years, we've announced over $8 billion in new capital investment and more than 27,000 new jobs. Our employment rate just hit an all-time low. More people are working here now than ever before. In the past year, we've welcomed many new businesses to South Carolina and celebrated the growth and expansions with those who already call our great state home. Some of them are here with us tonight. I'd like to recognize them and ask them to stand. We'll recognize them as a group. Recognizing W International, Mr. Ed Walker and Ms. Michelle Fowler, if you will please stand. Representing Kent, and remain standing. Representing Kent International, Mr. Arnold Kamler and Mr. Scott Kamler. Representing Drox Mayer Group, Mr. Bradley Nelson and Mr. Chip Vogel. Representing Keurig Dr. Pepper, Mr. Randy Downing and Ms. Pam Daskalakis. Representing Sunoco, Mr. Rob T.D. and Mr. Roger Schrum. Representing Google, Mr. Paul Karff. Representing Round Point Mortgage, Mr. Kevin Brungart. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to this historic State House. We are glad you're here. Ladies and gentlemen, did you notice at the inauguration ceremony 2 weeks ago on the steps, in addition to the display of the leadership of our academic institutions, the presence of 27 diplomats from 22 countries? They were there. These visitors are here for one reason: commerce, investment, and prosperity. They see that we in this state are on the way up in this country. They know that we have recognized and are harnessing the catalytic power of the collaborations between and among business and industry and academia. In a word, it is called brain power. Brain power produces commercial horsepower, and that horsepower drives our economic prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, we in South Carolina are players in the greatest economic competition the world has ever seen. We must be bold, aggressive, and think long term. We must keep the people and institutions of South Carolina leading in this competition. It has taken years to get to where we are, but we must do more. That means some things. That means we must keep taxes low. We must reduce burdensome regulations, and we must invest heavily in infrastructure. We now have the highest marginal income tax rate in the Southeast. the 12th highest in the nation. That's too high. 7 states have no income tax at all. Taxes of all kinds at all levels add up little by little to smother economic growth. Beating the competition today requires reforming our state's marginal income and corporate tax rates. That's why I have proposed a $2.2 billion tax cut across all personal income brackets, which would result in an average 15% rate reduction. And that is why I commend the House and Senate for embarking on a comprehensive effort to reform our state's tax structure. Working together, I am certain that we will succeed and keep South Carolina winning. This year, our vigorous economy created a budget surplus. My executive budget sends $20 million of this surplus back to the South Carolina taxpayers in the form of a one-time rebate check. They earned the money. Surpluses don't mean we have to spend it all. A surplus allows us to prioritize the most critical needs in state government and then return the rest to the taxpayers. We should commit to returning tax dollars back to our state's businesses at every opportunity. Last year, I issued a $52 million cut to the unemployment insurance taxes paid by our state's employers. This was made possible by the leadership and work done by many of the people in this room tonight to reform and rebuild our state's trust fund. The time has come to redouble our commitment to our state's men and women in uniform, veterans, first responders, law officers, firefighters, and peace officers through a full retirement income exemption. The exemption for veterans is a key factor in the Pentagon's decision on protecting and expanding a state's military bases, of which we have 8, and expanding and bringing new missions and troops to our bases. It is also an effective incentive to keep experienced law officers, firefighters, and first responders on the job. We are now another year into an ongoing state retirement pension crisis. Our unfunded liability threatens to place unprecedented strain on state government if we do not take action soon. Retired, current, and future public employees must have a pathway to retirement income security with future benefits and costs that are both sustainable and predictable. Doing nothing now threatens our commitment. We must work. We must do it. It's a fact, ladies and gentlemen, that we have some of the strongest people in the country in education in South Carolina. For example, in 2001, Dr. Sharon Budden of Ridgeview High School, and then in 2009, the late Lucy Beckham of Wando High School were named National Principal of the Year. Last year is Dr. Akil Ross of Chapin High School. He was here. This year, we celebrate again with Dr. Lucas C. Clamp of River Bluff High School, being recognized as the National Principal of the Year. They're not able to be with us tonight, but we thank them for exemplifying the greatness of South Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, we are building an international reputation for business growth and progress. You saw that with the diplomats. Being perceived as weak in any part of our state, including in education, is not good. But being perceived as not committed to fixing it is a disaster. Not long ago, I had a conversation with a fascinating woman, Dr. Wanda Andrews, the superintendent of the Lee County School District, a rural county. Education suffers there. You've been there. Once grown, children leave, only returning for maybe a family reunion or a homecoming football game. I asked Dr. Andrews not long ago what would happen if a new manufacturing plant offering 500 or so jobs were to come to her school district. I wish you could have seen it. Dr. Andrews set down her yellow sharpened number 2 pencil, took off her glasses, and said, and I quote, "It would change everything." Dr. Andrews. Dr. Andrews, that is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to change everything. Mark my words, the words corridor of shame will soon be a distant memory. Dr. Andrews, stand up. Let us recognize you again. This is going to require work. It will require a state-backed economic development commitment to bring jobs to these districts by providing infrastructure in rural areas, not only in water, sewer, and roads, but in school buildings and facilities. School buildings and facilities. We must provide the spark in those school districts. My executive budget creates the Rural School District Economic Development Closing Fund. This fund will provide $100 million for our Department of Commerce to use as a closing fund to bring new jobs and investment to our poorest school districts. We must also invest in our teachers. To attract and retain the best, their compensation must be competitive with their peers in the Southeast and elsewhere. My executive budget calls for a 5% teacher pay raise totaling $155 million. This will increase average teacher salaries in South Carolina above the Southeast average. And now's the time, but we can't stop there. The primary funding formula for public education, as you know, the Education Finance Act was established about 40 years ago. That and those formulae that have followed have become outdated, inefficient, and confusing. To say they are complex is an understatement. They fail to provide the accountability, efficiency, and transparency necessary for a modern means of measurement to determine if taxpayer dollars are being properly delivered and utilized in the classroom. Last week, Speaker Lucas and President Pamela and I called on the State Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office to objectively review South Carolina's complex education funding formulas and suggest a new, more efficient and modern funding model for the General Assembly to consider. Further, Speaker Lucas and Senator Greg Embry will propose wholesale reforms to our education delivery system, eliminating burdensome testing, consolidating school districts, replacing non-productive school boards, and reining in the practice of social promotions in our classrooms. I support the Speaker and the Senator 100%. Send me these reforms and I will sign them into law. But we can't stop there either. Our classrooms and schools must also be safe, free from distraction and violence. It's a fact. The presence of a trained, certified law enforcement officer is the best and most effective deterrent against violence at a school. Local police officers or sheriff's deputies who serve as school resource officers are trained to spot, assess, and eliminate any potential threat. They train constantly. They immediately communicate and coordinate with local law enforcement. Last year, we held a school safety summit of law enforcement, educators, counselors, mental health professionals, parents, and students to address the rise of violence in our schools. 2 recommendations were made over and over at that summit and afterwards. One was to place a school resource officer in every school. The second was to provide access to mental health professionals who can train educators to recognize the warning signs of violent behavior in their students before it happens. But some school districts can't afford such personnel. Therefore, my executive budget ensures that every public school in our state has a full-time trained law enforcement officer and access to a mental health counselor through the Department of Mental Health's School Services Program. And the time to act on this is now, not next year, now. For decades, every family's goal was for their children to go to college, which then meant a 4-year degree. Higher education was and still is the key to success. But ladies and gentlemen, the industries have changed. The work has changed. The skills required in today's modern workplace require us to stay ahead of demand and adapt with rapid advancements in technology. Modern manufacturing plants and assembly lines have been transformed into intricate computerized environments driven by advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, and sophisticated logistical delivery systems which are designed to deliver finished products around the world from South Carolina. This economic prosperity can also be achieved today through 2-year associate degrees and a multitude of certificates from our state's exemplary technical colleges. Our technical college, 16 colleges, established in 1961, is the best in the country. Last year, our Ready SC program trained over 3,600 people for 82 different companies. It is known around the world. My budget also triples existing funding for Ready SC, making more than $19 million available for training new employees for business in the next fiscal year. Right now, South Carolina has 60,000, count them, 60,000 highly paid jobs looking for people. High-tech production, advanced manufacturing. They demand workers in the skilled trades, plumbing, masonry, carpentry, and others, high-paying jobs. The demand is so great that our businesses have to go out of state to recruit them. High school students and their parents must be made aware that these new opportunities are readily available now. My executive budget prioritizes funding for our technical colleges to identify and recruit local businesses to participate in collaborative partnerships with high schools, to create internship opportunities, and to promote certificate completion. This will provide our local businesses with a pipeline of future employees who are ready to work. My budget also includes $63 million in additional dollars that are dedicated to workforce training and development. It triples new lottery funding for workforce scholarships and grants to help students attend our state's technical colleges. But even with this growth, the cost associated and debt associated with higher education is becoming a barrier for many students and their families. With 10 years of tuition and fee increases, student loan debt in South Carolina has risen by 315%. That is the highest in the country. I am proposing a one-year freeze on tuition and fees for in-state students at our public technical colleges, four-year colleges, and research universities for the 2019-2020 academic year. In exchange for freezing in-state tuition and fees to be certified by the Commission on Higher Education, institutions will receive a 6% increase in their annual base budget. That will be their pro rata share from a $36 million appropriation my budget makes to the Commission on Higher Education. I expect this one-year tuition freeze not to be the end, but to serve as the first steps toward a comprehensive reform of higher education funding and tuition. Ladies and gentlemen, our state's excellent institutions of higher education play a vital role in our state's economic prosperity. Their continued success is critical to keeping South Carolina competitive and winning. That's not all. We must also continue to invest in infrastructure. Our ports, roads, and rail are critical components of our economic prosperity. In December, the South Carolina Ports Authority reported a 6.4 year-over-year container volume growth with a record 2.3 million units handled in 2018. That marked the third consecutive year of record volume, when we're only getting stronger. The deepening of the Charleston Harbor is one of our most important steps to accelerate our future prosperity. Working with President Trump and his administration, and with the assistance of Senator Graham and our congressional delegation, last year we secured an additional $49 million to keep the Charleston Harbor dredging project on schedule. There's more to come. And remember, this General Assembly wisely provided the first $300 million several years ago to guarantee the fulfillment of the project. Once this project is completed, Charleston, our port in Charleston, South Carolina, will have the deepest, most efficient harbor on the Atlantic, allowing post-Panamax ships to carry even bigger loads in and out of South Carolina, spurring economic growth throughout the whole state. This is an enormous competitive advantage, and to it we will add in the years ahead a revitalized port of Georgetown and a new port of Jasper. Two men critical in this are Chairman Bill Stern and CEO Jim Newsom of the South Carolina Ports Authority. I thank them for their vision and dedication. Mr. Newsom couldn't be tonight, but Chairman Stern is here. I ask that he stand and be recognized. And your wife, Linda, Ms. Stern. The fundamental purpose of government is to protect people and property. Today, we understand the many advantages of replacing recidivism with employment. We also know that more officers on the street mean less crime. My executive budget provides more than $33 million for law enforcement, corrections, probation, firefighting, and other criminal justice agencies to use for pay raises, retention bonuses, and hiring new officers. It also includes an additional $40 million to the Department of Corrections to expedite security system upgrades and modernization, as well as critical repairs to damaged prison facilities. Director Brian Sterling's focus on workforce readiness among inmates has resulted in South Carolina having one of the lowest recidivism rates in the country. More former inmates are re-entering their communities with a job than ever before in South Carolina. Our state is a safer place because of Director Sterling's leadership. He is one of the most innovative and effective directors of the prison systems in the United States. Brian Sterling, will you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the silent hurricane of opioid addiction continues to pummel the Palmetto State, just as nature's hurricanes do. The death toll from opioid-related overdosing continued to rise in 2017, with 748 opioid-related fatalities across South Carolina. There were just 57 in 2014. Last year, I declared a statewide public health emergency, mobilizing the full power of the state's emergency infrastructure in response to the growth of opioid addiction and abuse. And I signed what must be the most comprehensive set of laws in the country addressing this crisis across the spectrum of law enforcement, education, and health care, produced by this General Assembly. For instance, our doctors are now required to educate minors and their families on the dangers of opioids before prescribing them. DHEC is issuing tamper-proof prescription pads. The anti-overdose drug Narcan is more readily available, and initial prescriptions are now limited to 7 days. I also established the Opioid Emergency Response Team, which in June released a plan consisting of recommendations on physical and public education, prevention and response, treatment and recovery, and law enforcement approaches. Although there is still much to be done, this progress would not have happened without the leadership of our Director of the Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services, Director Sarah Goldsby. Please stand and be recognized. A healthy mind in a healthy body was the classical ideal. Today, it is another competitive advantage. Unfortunately, especially some of our rural areas, access to good health care is lacking. But fortunately, we know how to fix that. As always, education and knowledge are essential to progress. But so is the convenient access to health care professionals. This can be done in 2 ways, physical presence and virtual presence. We're doing both. Last year, I signed the law repealing the restriction which required nurse practitioners to work only within 45 miles of their supervising physician. Now they can go anywhere. You're now seeing them in drugstores, rural clinics, and soon other convenient locations. Virtual presence is accomplished by telehealth, in which South Carolina leads the nation. We are the home of the Medical University of South Carolina, which is now designated a National Telehealth Center of Excellence, only one of 2 in the country. This recognition would not have been achieved without the General Assembly investing and prioritizing innovation and optimization in the areas of stroke, obstetrics, mental health, and urgent care. So, through telehealth, we can expand access to health care. We can improve health care outcomes and reduce costs, and we will continue to do it. There's another kind of health which we frankly must address, and that is the health of the public's confidence in their public servants and institutions. As we move forward together, we must reaffirm our commitment to good, honest government. As elected officials, we are stewards of the public trust. South Carolinians must trust their representatives, and representatives must demonstrate that they are deserving of that trust. Maintaining the public's trust in government at all levels requires transparency and accountability on why and how every single taxpayer dollar is spent. The best disinfectant against waste and corruption is sunshine. That means stronger and expanded authority for the State Ethics Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone paid to influence decisions by a state, county, municipal, or school board official must be required to publicly register with the State Ethics Commission as a lobbyist. Public officials must be required to recuse themselves when a conflict exists. And public officials in all branches of government, at all levels, must comply with the Freedom of Information Act. I ask my colleagues to take this fresh opportunity to bring all of government into the sunlight and restore and ensure the confidence of all. South Carolina's bright economic future and continued job growth require an abundant supply of clean and affordable energy. Without it, we're at a competitive disadvantage. However, Santee Cooper is currently saddled with almost $9 billion in debt. Over $4 billion of that debt from the failed V.C. Summer nuclear reaction construction project alone, and with nothing to show for it. This huge debt will have to be paid. Santee Cooper will have no choice but to raise rates on customers to pay this debt. Their largest customer, the electric co-ops, will be required to pay 70% of it for the next 30 years. I am honored to serve on the committee with members of the House and Senate to present to you potential solutions concerning the future of Santee Cooper. I ask that members of this General Assembly keep an open and objective mind when you receive this information. We must be deliberate and wise because the future of our economy is at stake. Ladies and gentlemen, this land, our land, is noted by the explorers many years ago for kings and queens, is lush, fertile, brimming with abundance in plant and animal life. It is irreplaceable. The obligation and privilege of our generation and others is to use it, cultivate it, develop it, and also to protect it and encroach upon it only gently. Our economic growth and the preservation of our natural environment are not opposing objectives which must be balanced as in a competition, one against the other. They are instead complementary, each dependent on these others. To these ends, I recently established the South Carolina Floodwater Commission. It's unique in the United States. There's not another one. This commission's purpose is to provide guidance, solutions, and opportunities presented by inland and coastal flooding and all that entails. Its scope will be global to be applied here in South Carolina. Such an extraordinary effort requires leadership. That's why I've asked another South Carolina leader to chair the commission. noted attorney, former JAG officer, and former commander of the South Carolina State Guard, General Tom Mulliken. Please stand and be recognized, sir. Economic prosperity requires that we address water in a comprehensive fashion, whether it's flooding, sea rise, aquifer depletion, or upstream withdrawal. Make no mistake, a plentiful water supply is essential to our manufacturing, agricultural, and tourism industries, as well as to our quality of life. That means that we must stand firmly against all efforts to endanger the future of our pristine coastline, our beaches, our sea islands, our marshes, and our watersheds. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that we will not have offshore testing or drilling off the coast of South Carolina. Thank you. One final story about strong people. We got strong people all over South Carolina. I'm so proud of us. We have to let the children know to be proud of us, proud of themselves, proud of this state. For 2.5 days last September, Hurricane Florence stormed across North and South Carolina, battering the coast with hurricane-force winds, storm surge, and massive amounts of rainfall. The winds were less than originally predicted by all the experts. The water, however, was many times worse. That rainfall sent almost biblical amounts of water racing into and onto South Carolina from the sky and from the rivers in North Carolina. Flooding created catastrophic flooding all along the Lynch's, Lombard, PD, Great PD, Little PD, and the Waccamaw rivers, surpassing anything recorded in modern history in South Carolina. And it stayed there for weeks. Access to the Grand Strand, that whole section of Horry County, was threatened by historic rising floodwaters poised to overtake, wash out, and destroy the roads and bridges into Myrtle Beach and the surrounding area, and they did. In addition, the threat of an environmental catastrophe was now on our doorstep with the certain overtopping of the closed Santee Cooper ash pond on the edge of the mighty Waccamaw in Conway. Thus began a remarkable feat of cooperation, engineering, science, hydrology, technology, and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, 4-foot-tall barriers were built on both sides of US 501 at Conway, saving that vital highway from certain flooding and breach from which it would have taken months to recover. A 4-foot aqua dam was erected surrounding the 8-acre ash ponds to keep potentially deadly coal ash and toxins from flowing into the Waccamaw River and the Wynyah watershed all the way down to Georgetown. And potential breaches along US 378 and State Highway 9 were blunted. Who did this? Who were the participants? They were the men and women of the Department of Transportation and the South Carolina National Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Christy Hall and Major General Bob Livingston are here. Please stand and be recognized. In closing, to my friends and colleagues in the General Assembly, many for many years, I can remember when some of us were children thinking about running for office, it seems. All of us in this building do not wear the same jerseys. but we're still all on the same team. We will work together to ensure that future generations of South Carolinians are able to keep winning and prospering. Now is the time to be bold, not bashful. Now is the time to act together this year, now, ladies and gentlemen. May God bless you. May God bless the great state of South Carolina. May God bless the great United States of America. Thank you.
Members of the Joint Assembly, please continue to stand as His Excellency, the Governor, and his distinguished party depart the chamber.
And that just concluded Governor McMaster's 2019 State of the State address. Now for the Democratic message, we go to Senator John Scott, a Democrat from Columbia.
Hi, I'm State Senator John L. Scott Jr., and I'm joining you tonight from our state capital. Those of us who call South Carolina home can agree that we're a great state, one rich in history and full of strength. Having served almost 30 years in the legislature, I hope you can agree with me. It is time for a change. Tonight, I could use this opportunity to contradict everything that the Governor McMaster has said, rally my party's base, and raise my own political profile. But that won't get us anywhere. That would not do anything to help the father who's too tired to help his children with their homework because he works 2 jobs to pay the bills and put food on the table. It would not do anything to help the teacher who works an extra shift at Walmart because all the professional training and expertise doesn't translate into professional wages. It would not help the grandmother in Bamberg or Fairfield County whose doctor left the rural county because the local hospital closed, and now she has to drive more than an hour for treatment. All the while her medical cost keeps going up and up. Sure, we could continue down the same path that we traveled last year, but that would not help the children in our communities whose mouths are filled with cavities because the only job mom and dad can find is working part-time at some big box store or telemarketing center that doesn't provide dental insurance. Other small business owner who is facing some of the highest health care and energy costs in the nation. Other truck drivers who are risking their lives every day while driving on roads and bridges that are crumbling beneath them. Or the state employees who continue to work without a pay raise. Or the countless police officers and firefighters who are watching their pension disappear. I appreciate our governor and his comments on our state, but all the promises and platitudes in the world will not change the facts. 1 out of every 3 jobs in this state pay less than $25,000 per year. And women earn 27% less than men. We have one of the lowest per capita income in America. Promises won't change that, but action could. Imagine what would happen if we came together and gave the teachers and state employees the raise that they deserve. Imagine what would happen if we stopped wasting time and energy and resources we spend every year arguing about private schools and start listening to the growing numbers of voices, joining the Democrats to invest in and improve our public schools and make higher education affordable and available to all. Imagine what would happen if we built an economic bridge between our urban and rural communities that would benefit both with better education, health care, jobs, and more opportunities. Imagine if we listened to our friends and neighbors and local leaders and stood up to the corporate polluters who would destroy our lakes and rivers and forests and coastline, all for the sake of out-of-state stakeholders. Imagine if one bad choice didn't have to follow you the rest of your life. Or imagine the parent not having to worry about the child's safety during a routine traffic stop. Right now, more than 150,000 South Carolinians work hard every day but still can't go to the doctor when they're sick because the governor will not expand Medicaid. But it doesn't have to be that way. Yes, I could spend my time debating with the governor and his party and blame them for the hard times our families are facing here in South Carolina. After all, they've controlled both the House and the Senate and the governor's office for a generation. But I'm not interested in blaming someone for our problems. I'm interested in solving them. So instead, let us use this opportunity to invite the governor and my friends on the other side of the aisle to join us as we launch a new contract for working families, a new vision for South Carolina, and what people of this state should expect. I'm talking about not having another empty promise or political pledge. I'm talking about a vow, simple yet solemn and sacred to the people, a vow met with real action and new direction. We will raise wages so that an honest day's worker receive an honest day pay. We will rebuild our roads and bridges, making them safe, and will make health care and higher education affordable and accessible. We will protect the environment, invest in our communities, and ensure greater opportunities and equal justice for all. I invite the governor and his party to join us, not next week or after the next election, but right now, because it's time for change. And if we do not come together, then none of us deserve to be here. Thank you, and may God continue to bless South Carolina.
And that was Senator John Scott delivering the Democratic message. But right now I'm getting joined by some lawmakers and Representative Anderson here. What did you think about the governor's speech tonight? It was unique. There was a lot that we've already heard. But what stood out to you, sir?
Well, what stood out to me is the governor addressed some things that we've been talking about 15 years that I've been here. This is my 15th year. And I was happy to hear him talk about the things that we've been dealing with and talking about and asking for. So as a Democrat, I was very happy. The governor did an excellent speech. He brought through some stuff. We loved the part about education. He talked about a 5% raise for all teachers. I'd like to see teachers get more than that. I was just out to Arizona mid-December for a Heartland Institute, and Arizona gave a 20%, 10 the first year, 5 the next 2 years. So we're really going to beef up on that to try to get more than 5% for the teachers. We would like to see school districts consolidated. There are some school districts across the state needs to be consolidated. And the other thing, the technical institution, the money that he's going to put there is excellent, because I'm a graduate of Horry Georgetown Technical College, so that's one beef. Williamsburg Technical College was used as a pilot this year with students for no tuition, and it was a wonderful time. What he talked about the colleges, no increases, 6% across the board, each college is going to get. That's great, because it's a hardship. With paying back tuitions and everything, these students leave college with a degree, and hey, they've got an Excel of 100,000 plus in debt. So those were great things. The other part when he talked about the ports of South Carolina, and I'm so glad the governor thought about the letter that I wrote him, the conversations that I've had to him. He did an excellent job during the hurricane and the flood coming through Georgetown, Horry County, and other counties, and he mentioned it tonight. It's in black and white. He's going to make sure that the port of Georgetown is also dredged. That's something that we've been fighting for a long time. So I look forward to working with the governor, working with the lieutenant governor, and the Democrats. We are expecting him to do what he said. Great speech tonight, Governor. Thank you once again. We look forward to a great working relationship.
Thank you very much, Representative. Appreciate it. About to be joined by Senate Judiciary Chairman Luke Rankin. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Good. We got some Senate leadership on this show today. What did you think about the governor's speech? What jumped out to you? We actually heard him being really firm with offshore drilling. Anything else, maybe?
Well, without a doubt, that's one of the highlights. But I want to comment on the entire theme, the tone, and the reception that he got. It's been a long time since that full chamber, or that chamber has been full. And so I think that is a great sign for him and for us. Truly a guy who wants to work with us to work for the people. And so I'm really excited about that. And again, in respect to him, his new term, great turnout for him and a lot of enthusiasm in our
Senator, why do you think that there is maybe more of a teamwork environment going forward with the governor at this point? I mean, I know we had some rough and tumble between the governors in the past and the lawmakers in the House and the Senate. What's changed in your opinion right now?
Well, Governor McMaster is a person who obviously is open about his agenda. There's no secret side subtle chess game with him. It's a checkers game, and it's smart politics. I don't agree with all of it, but certainly it's been refreshing so far not to be the enemy. We're all in this together. We are one team, and so I'm excited about that. Seismic drilling, without a doubt, a highlight. Tacking a little differently on the Santee Cooper piece. Not to sell it,
in the speech too.
But keeping an open mind. And so as he talks about economic development and the cost to our economy, there are folks in our area, in Horry County particularly, and the service area that will have a far greater price increase on their utilities if we sell this and we lose that tax advantage.
And are we going to be able to tackle all that? I know last year was really the year of SC&G. Santee Cooper almost seems like it's kind of getting a little bit back burner, at least from lawmakers and priorities, with education being the top one. Where do we see much progress with anything with Santee Cooper this session?
I don't see us passing any effort to sell Santee Cooper as he campaigned in his election for. I see no appetite in the Senate for that. Are there improvements that need to be made? Certainly. And I think we will keep an open mind about that. But the idea of wholesale selling it to an investor-owned utility who will pass those rates and pay this debt on their backs no less than we're going to have to do currently is a false idea. So I'm excited about the tone, the tenor, and so thank you for having us.
Sir.
And go Myrtle Beach, go Horry County, and thank you so much.
Appreciate it, sir. I got your majority leader right here.
All right.
Senator Shane Massey, Republican Majority Leader in the Senate. We were just talking to Senator Rankin, Judiciary Chairman. He said it's interesting to hear this unity speech coming from the governor. Are you guys getting that feeling? Are your members excited about working with the governor, having that kind of ability to be able to reach out to him and give their priorities a listen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Senate has been willing to work with the governor. I mean, we've all gotten to know Henry McMaster for a while when he was lieutenant governor. Many of us knew him before that. So I think there's a real willingness to work with the governor. None of us really want to be fighting with the governor.
Did anything stand out to you? I was talking to Senator Rankin about this when he really kind of came out, the governor came out and really said no to offshore drilling and seismic testing. I know we've alluded to it before, but it seems like he was really firm with that in his speech tonight.
He did seem to be pretty firm on that. He was firm on a lot of things tonight. I mean, it was a pretty firm speech. It was a fine speech. It was good. You know, the thing that I liked about it, and I think it's important in these types of addresses, is the governor has a strong obligation here to set out a vision for what he would like for South Carolina to be. And I think Governor McMaster did that tonight. A lot of it we've heard before, but it's important because it is his vision and it's important to be consistent in that. Now it's time to do the hard work, and that is to get to work on the details of accomplishing many of those things. And I do think that's the hard part. But I'm pleased to hear the governor say that he wants to work together with the General Assembly, the House and the Senate. And I think if we do that, if we can all work together, then we can accomplish a lot of those things.
And I know we've got plenty of other lawmakers, but I want to make sure. I know there's extra money in the budget this year, which also sometimes makes things more difficult. Are we going to be able to do everything that he said, $200 million in rebates, or is that something that might have to be adjusted going forward? I mean, will we still see that good faith going forward? I know it's very early in this session, but things certainly change as we get closer to May.
Yeah, well, I'm sure a lot of legislators are going to have different priorities on how the money should be spent, if it should be spent at all. But I think it's important, first of all, that the governor set out the vision and to provide some leadership on that, and then we can see how that process plays out. But you're right, we are very fortunate. We have a surplus this year, pretty significant surplus, and there are lots of ideas on how that money should be spent. But you're not going to spend it on good stuff if you don't set out the vision first and then exercise the leadership in order to make sure it's spent in a responsible manner that best serves people. So that's the first start. Then we got to get to work on it.
So more work to be done, and we got plenty of several weeks left. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
it. Thanks, Gavin.
We got Senate Education Committee Chairman Greg Embry with us. Senator, thanks for joining us. Obviously, you just took over the Senate Education Committee. Right. Big education reform speech, top priority for not only the governor but lawmakers. Right. What stood out to you in that speech when it came to education reform? Was it higher ed? Was it trying to get a different formula for K through 12? Or
the biggest parts, I think, and the most urgent things that we need to reform are the K-12 system and both the funding mechanism and there's substantive changes that need to be made in the system, governance, safety. I mean, there's the whole host of those consolidation that need to be addressed in our K-12 system. You know, quite frankly, our kids aren't, many of our children are not ready to go to higher education. So, I think, it's really not, it's kind of the chicken before the egg. Well, K-12 is before higher ed. So both need work, but I think there'll be a great deal of focus on K-12 this year.
And what's going to kind of count as a win for lawmakers for the governor this year? Is it getting just teacher pay raises? Is it getting some of these funding reforms done? Seems like more.
I wouldn't expect to get the funding reform done. I think that's a 2-year project. It's a major lift to get through that. I think teacher pay raises will be the biggest financial win that we can look for this year, and I think that's very doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. I think the second part is on the reform package, the more substantive reforms in the system. As many of those as we can get are all wins. I mean, so all those are steps in the right direction. So it's and wins really for the kids. That's our main.
A lot of his priorities too, are those in line with maybe the Senate and also the Education Committee's priorities? Money for economic development in rural school districts. How do you feel about a lot of his priorities aligning with the Senate's priorities?
Well, I think they're essential. I mean, they're essential. Both the Senate, the House, really our rural areas in particular. We've got to get some economic development into those struggling areas because, quite frankly, an education system cannot drive an economy, but an economy will drive an education system. So it is for long term. If we're going to have long-term health in those communities, we've got to have economic development.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Gavin. Good to see you.
And we got Representative Bill Taylor. I don't have my cell phone on me. I'm not texting right now, sir.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Put your cell phone down and just drive.
Exactly.
So drive this TV camera.
Sir, tell me a little bit about what you thought of the governor's speech tonight and what stood out to you, maybe your constituents back home.
Henry McMaster is certainly an uplifting governor. He says South Carolina is red hot. It is. It's red hot in every way. Well, it's red in politics too, but it's red hot. I mean, the economic development, all that we're doing. But most importantly, he is a man that wants bold action now, and he's willing to work with the legislature. He was at lunch with us yesterday. He tells us what he needs, what he wants, how he'll support us. That's refreshing here. There's no clashing of the governor's office and the legislature. We're one team, South Carolina. He went through the things that are really, really important. Bold education reform. We can get this done. We really can. Not next year, this year. Get it done this year. He talked about tax reform on the Tax Reform Committee in the House. We can get that done as well. We just have to have the courage, the fortitude to move forward on all these levels. He brought up pension reform, which isn't talked about much here. Highly important that get done too. Henry McMaster, in that speech, as he has done with his inaugural address, as he did on the campaign trail, he sees a bright, bold future for South Carolina, and he's willing to lead us. I have said in introducing him on several occasions at big rallies, I said, let's harken back to the days of Carol Campbell, working with the legislature, getting things done. That's Henry McMaster. He's going to get stuff done here, good stuff for this state, and good stuff for our citizens.
And the lawmakers with him. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
We got Representative Caesar McKnight, Williamsburg County.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing fine.
What did you think of the governor's address tonight? A Democrat from Williamsburg County, like I said, a rural area in the state. Did a lot of these ideas, education, strike home for you?
A lot of things that the governor said made me cautiously optimistic. My district is along the corridor of shame. Every bit of it, all of my schools in the corridor of shame. So if the governor is truly committed to fixing our rural school problem, then I'm all for that. I think he is. So it's one of those things where my interest is piqued, and so I'm in a wait and see mode. I do think that the rural school districts need more focus, more attention, and more money than the other districts because they've been neglected and they've been so decrepit for so long. I mean, in my home county, Williamsburg County, we haven't built a new high school since 1970. So our children deserve better, and they're going to need a little more than everybody else gets. So I'm cautiously optimistic by that. The thing that struck me is what the governor didn't say. He didn't mention anything about Medicaid Medicare expansion. We desperately need that because that would put almost 100,000 more people with access to health care. And I also don't like his proposal, which he didn't mention tonight, about having the work requirement for Medicare and Medicaid. I think that's a bit punitive, and I think that's something we need to we should step away from. But overall, I thought it was a good speech. The governor has credibility in my eyes because he hasn't done anything yet to make me think less of him, so I'm cautiously optimistic.
Very good. Well, I got another guy from the PD right up next. I appreciate talking with you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Terry Alexander, it's also his birthday, another Democrat from the PD. Thoughts, takeaways? I was just talking to your colleague Cesar Knight about what this means for schools along the corridor of shame. Did some of this stand out to you? The $100 million, for example, for infrastructure investment for some of these schools in those rural areas?
Well, I'm glad to see the governor's doing that because the Democrats have been talking about that for years now. We even put highlight on the corridor of shame. And if you're really serious about educating, every student in this state, then you're going to invest your dollars and your cents where they are. So we're excited about it. We hope that the other people in the General Assembly will follow suit on the governor in implementing and spending a minimum of $100 million along the corridor of shame.
So again, I'm hearing from a lot of Democrats and other lawmakers about this unity between the governor's office and the lawmakers. Is this something that is been a long time coming?
I think the Democrat has always been pushing for for health care, for education for all of our students, for infrastructure in those poor areas. So this is nothing new. This has been our sounding card for years on top of years. Now remember, it has been the Republicans who's been in charge for the last 20 years of the governor's office, the Senate, and the House, and now they're beginning to see, well, we got to do something about these rural areas. So we're excited about them doing. We've been blowing that horn for years now, so I'm glad they finally heard it, and prayerfully they're moving forward in that regard.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Representative Alexander.
Sir. Thank you.
Got Representative Robert Brown up here. How you doing, sir?
Hello, hi. How are you?
Good, good. I was just talking to Representative Alexander about education reform. Was that maybe a top issue that you heard from the governor's speech tonight?
Most certainly. I think it is the top issue, not only for the governor, but for many of us. That's an issue that the Democrats been crying for, fighting for years. And now that the governor is focusing on it, I think we're really going to get something done that will give a high level of education to all of our children across the state. Badly needed, and I'm delighted he's with us.
And then also higher education reform and student debt. Is that also a top issue for Democrats and for lawmakers?
Yeah, and I'm just happy to hear the governor's focus in on that again. And education is key for economic development. I mean, great high-paying job, which is what we need. And the governor also focused on economic development. I would like to see him spend money on the I-95 corridor, the corridor of shame, economic development, which would bring in much more jobs and improve education across the state. And I must say, I agree with the governor's position on no drilling on the coast of South Carolina. We don't want it. We don't need it. Why should we destroy a $20 billion industry with 600,000 jobs? It's not good for the state.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. We got Representative David Mack. How are you doing, sir?
How are you?
Good. Just want to hear what your takeaway was from the governor's speech tonight. Obviously, it sounds like education's been a big one. A lot of people have been saying that healthcare wasn't mentioned. What was in the speech that you liked, and maybe what wasn't in the speech that you didn't like?
No, it's a good speech. We have to see what'll happen. It's the speaker and the governor, since we first got back, was driving education, education, education. I think the business community has really gotten under the Republican Party that this is important. This is critical. And as a Democrat, I'd like to say just welcome to the party. Great to have you there. We have to really get to work and do some serious things. We're talking about a shortage of school teachers. We're talking about a shortage of truck drivers. We're talking about a shortage of healthcare workers. And the thing that really should scare us nationwide, a possible shortage, they're predicting a shortage of airline pilots, which could cripple the world. So we're going to have to check the funding, figure out how to, first of all, pay these teachers properly and get the resources into the rural schools to do what it should do. From a healthcare standpoint, Medicaid expansion. We did not do that. It's still hurting us. Not only is you're talking about keeping people well, you're talking about 50,000 well-paying jobs, which drives the economy, which helps education. So as we move forward, we're all singing on the same out of the same hymn book. We have to make sure logistically we're doing the right thing, because the Republicans' interpretation of what's good for education and the Democrats' our interpretation of what's good for education could be totally different when you get to the nuts and bolts. So we have to get to the details and see what happens.
See what happens. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And Representative Wendell Gilliard from the Charleston area.
Yeah.
Representative, we heard the governor again talk about school resource officers in schools. I know school safety is a big issue for you. Is that something you support? What else did you maybe hear in the governor's speech that stands out to you?
Well, first of all, I thought when he did his State of the State, the first thing he should have opened up with was a prayer for all these 800,000 plus federal employees who are out here starving and standing in food lines. He did not do that. Secondly, how can we have a State of the State address when we can't even have a State of the Union address? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people have to understand one thing. When it comes to these teachers in the state of South Carolina, we have an exodus. This is serious. Okay, so giving 5% across the board for these teachers, no, that's not going to stop that mass exodus. They need 15% across the board. Okay, if we're going to keep piecemealing this with these teachers, South Carolina is going to lose. Okay, and you have to understand that I'm from Charleston. I'm from District 111. We had a tragedy in my district. The world came together with us. I'm asking for a hate crime bill in the state of South Carolina. You know, it has no physical impact. You know, it sends a message, you know, and it creates to the world that we're serious when it comes to these hate crimes. South Carolina, we're in the line now up to the top when it comes to these new hate groups that are being created in South Carolina, and this is a serious issue. So we have to be real about the things that we want to do. I was proud to hear about the harbor. Of course, as you well know, the state port is in my district, and that's about jobs. I'm down with that. Advanced manufacturing. I had introduced a bill when I first came to the State House to put in all the public schools in their curriculum advanced manufacturing.
So
now he's talking about
getting in line with the Democrats and yours. So
they're falling in line now. I'm glad that they're on board with education. It took them a century to come around, you know, and I give them their kudos. But that's what we're about. We have to work together.
I got to cut you off there, Representative Gilliard. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Got Representative Joe Jefferson here. Wendell Gilliard did a lot of talking for us. I think you might have something, any additional things to maybe say if you ever heard some of his conversation. What struck out to you from the governor's address tonight?
Well, I thought he did an outstanding job. I would have loved to have heard him talk a little bit more about the increases in teacher salary.
The 5% that he proposed.
The 5%, which comes to, according to his recommendation, $155 million. I am proposing some tax increase, more specifically with the cigarette tax, because that's needed. And if you were to put some tax increases on that, my plan would generate about $248 million, which is about what the teachers really need to be satisfied. And this is what we're looking for. Overall, I thought it was good. He had some very good comments to make. I think we ought to keep Santee Cooper. We certainly don't need to mess with those people. They're doing a good job. A lot of employees there. A lot of moving parts there.
A very complex issue nonetheless, too. So something that would take a lot of time as well going forward. And it sounds like we heard from the Senate Judiciary Chairman saying that there's no interest really, at least in the Senate, to sell Santee Cooper. So.
Which is very good. Yeah, we need to have Santee Cooper around. I think they're doing a great job.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I got Representative John Moore, Jay Moore. How you doing, Representative Moore?
How you doing?
Good. Tell me your initial thoughts on the governor's address tonight, his State address.
Well, I mean, I think my initial thoughts are cautiously optimistic. He'd said a lot of things that I agree with, and there's a lot of stuff that he'd left on the table. Those are my initial thoughts.
Gotcha. Anything with education, for example, the 5%, some of your colleagues are saying it's not enough. Do you think it's a good starting point?
Well, it's a good starting point, but it's a little too late for that. I mean, we should have done this 20 years ago. And we need to do something dramatic. Teachers need at least 10%, 15%. And we can do it. It's just what the priorities are. So definitely, I think it's a good start, and I'm glad that he's pushing that. We can definitely should be doing more. So what I did like that he said is he talked about mental health in school. I'm passionate about that. I have 2 bills right now, House Bill 3257 and House Bill 3258, and those deal with mental health awareness courses in school, and also having trained professionals in school working with teachers and employees at the schools. Gotcha. So I was very, very excited about him talking about that tonight.
$2.2 million.
That's right. That's right. Gotcha. For 50 employees this coming year, and continuing to, we have all schools by 2020 have a mental health professional there.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We got some more of your colleagues up here next.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Representative Marvin Pendarvis, I think are we live on another phone right now? Social media. Social media is taking over. Representative Pendarvis, some initial thoughts for you. You've only been in legislature for a few years, 2 years? A year now? Okay, so your second speech from the governor.
That's right.
What was this any different from what you heard from him last year?
To be honest with you, no. The only difference is that he's talking about education now, which I appreciate. The teacher raises, that's important. The increase to per pupil funding, that's important. The attention to mental health awareness in our schools, that's important. One of the things that I wish he would have talked about, and I think it's important, is we've got to talk about our affordable housing crisis here in South Carolina. One of the things that Governor McMaster likes to say is South Carolina is winning. And particularly it's winning, he says, is because we've got a business-friendly climate that attracts a lot of business here because of our tax breaks. Well, of course, if they're going to set up shop here, and that means they're going to bring their families here, and they're going to educate their children here. What we've got to do is make sure they can live here. And that they've got some adequate living, some workforce housing to be able to live in. And that's one of the things that we've been lacking in South Carolina, and one of the things that we have not been talking about as a state. I think we're behind the curve, and we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're going to be wishing that we had done something about this sooner. And so that's what I would have loved to have the governor talk about. One other thing is he talked about the surplus and the money that's coming in, and he wants to be able to give that back to the taxpayers. I'm not against that unless we make sure that we take care of core government functions.
Gotcha. So not using all that $200 million to give back to people, but maybe put it towards deferred
Absolutely.
maintenance.
If we've taken care of what we need to as a government and as a General Assembly, then I'm fine with giving it back to the people. But I don't think we've taken care of education. I don't think we've taken care adequately of infrastructure. I don't think we've taken care of the things that as a General Assembly, as a body, we're supposed to be taken care of. We've not done that. And so until we do that, that's when we can give the taxpayers back their money. But until we do that, we need to use that money to go towards furthering the advancement of South Carolina. And until we do that, then that's when we will give the money back.
Well, appreciate your input. We got another one of your colleagues coming up here.
Always good to see you. Thank you.
Representative Justin Bamberg. The governor said South Carolina is red hot. Do you agree with his statement, his take on the state of the state?
I think he raised a few good points. Quite frankly, I was pleased to hear some of what he said, because it's some of what we've been saying. I've been here going on 6 years, and it's some of the same points we've been preaching. Focusing on education, investing in this state. Yeah, so some good, some bad, but overall I think he did a good job, and just looking forward to working with him, and hopefully he'll stand behind everything he pointed out.
And another thing he's kind of alluded to, most recently when he rolled out his executive budget, was the role that his Lieutenant Governor Pamela is going to be playing and working with lawmakers. I know she was on the floor the other week in the House. Do you think that that's going to be a benefit to have maybe the executive branch nearby so you can talk about some of these priorities and kind of maybe work closer with the governor's office?
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea when the different branches of government can work together for the common good of the people of South Carolina. And I think that most of us in the House, whether you're Republican or Democrat, want to work with the governor's office, right? We may differ on the way to get there a lot.
Yeah.
But overall, we welcome her over there. I'm down to talk to her about anything. We're at a point now where South Carolina is just over talk. We need to get things done, and hopefully we'll be able to do that.
And I think we'll see that in the next 15 weeks when push comes to shove. So something to look forward to, but it sounds like there's a lot of unity going forward. So we'll see that going forward. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We got Representative Max Hyde. Good to see you, sir.
How do you do, Gavin?
Good, good. Tell me your thoughts on the governor's speech tonight. A lot of hot takes here so far. Governor saying the state's red hot. What are your thoughts on the state of South Carolina right now?
I'm so proud of the governor. I thought that was a 12 on a 10 scale, a strong message about a strong state by a strong governor. He means business. He knows the people. He knows the issues. And I love the breath of fresh air, of a collaborative spirit working with the General Assembly, partnering to move the state forward. Particularly with the upstate, and I represent part of Spartanburg County, we're concerned about the workforce development, talent development gap. The governor mentioned we have over 64,000 jobs without people, which leads to comprehensive educational reform. I'm very excited about working with the governor to hone in on what are the core holistic education issues that can change the trajectory for the state, both with the quality of living as well as the higher paying jobs.
Gotcha. So yeah, definitely the workforce development issue being key with education. Obviously, you can't have one without the other, so a lot remains to be seen.
It's a reciprocal relationship. I'm bullish on the future. I'm excited about South Carolina. We need sunshine for ethics, and the sun will keep shining on this great state. Thank you so much,
Very
Gavin.
good. Appreciate it, sir. Representative Annie McDaniel. Annie McDaniel, good to see you, ma'am.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing, ma'am? What were your thoughts on the governor's speech tonight? We heard a lot about education. We just heard about ethics reforms that some of the lawmakers want to see. Anything that stood out to you tonight?
Yeah, overall, I thought it was a good speech. A lot of the things that he mentioned in the speech are things that we've been advocating for a long time. My only disappointment is that we've waited so late to address those issues. And I think if we had addressed them a long time ago, it probably wouldn't take as much funding as it's now going to take. And I think we probably would not have lost so many of our students. And not necessarily lost them, but, you know.
And teachers as well, perhaps.
Exactly, and teachers. They're not where they would have been had we addressed this much sooner. The thing that disturbed me the most was the removal of school boards. I'm an 18-year veteran school board member, and we receive appropriate training as school board members. School board members are elected, so it concerns me that one body is able to produce legislation that would remove or replace a body that the people have elected. Yeah. And for me, if you're not satisfied with those that you have elected, then the people should be the ones that remove them, because we're compromising our democracy and our democratic process, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's something we've heard from the superintendent of education to some lawmakers talking about bills that could, reform, make maybe more transparent some of these school boards. Is that something that you would be on board with, just giving more clarity and maybe transparency about school boards in general, not necessarily getting rid of them if they feel like they should?
Exactly, because the school board members are responsible for setting policy, and most of that policy comes up through administration. So when you remove the school board members, are you removing the people who are actually causing the problems? And what we need to understand is that we have not fully funded education. So a lot of the school districts where the takeovers are occurring or in those areas where we have not adequately funded. Now, I do like the fact that they are going to look at the funding formula, but I'm saddened that we are looking at EFA when EFA was weighted. It includes weighted for the poor districts, and we have never fully funded it. So I think if we had fully funded the EFA and then it not produced the results that we wanted, then we should change it, but we never fully funded, and I think that's a problem. But let me mention real quick, one bill that I introduced as a freshman legislator that I was able to get passed today, and that is the E-rate funding that comes from the federal government. It's my contention that if we can ask the FCC to reduce the restrictions on those funds when they come to the school districts can have an option to utilize them for other telecommunication opportunities, such as our students who may not have internet access at home. If they have the Chrome notebooks or the laptops, then they can have the telephone service where they can access the internet when they get home, and that kind of help level the playing field for students who have internet access and those who do not.
Very good. Well, we
Yes.
appreciate your input, ma'am. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay.
We got Representative Jerry Govan. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Always welcome to see you on the show. Tell me your thoughts, education. We've been talking about education reforms. A lot of your colleagues have been talking about. What are your thoughts on what the governor's laid out tonight?
Well, you know, it was really exciting to hear that after some 20 years, and I've been here 26, to finally find a Republican leader that really seems to be serious about public education in this state. He said some good things, but of course the devils are in the details, and we need to look at to see whether the numbers match up. The only thing I'm disappointed in is I wish he had said that we were going to be willing to change the state's constitution from minimally adequate to high quality. I think it's important for a long-term commitment that goes beyond this General Assembly and this governor. But overall, it was an upbeat message, and we look forward at the Legislative Black Caucus of talking to him about the details when he comes in February.
And he said in his inauguration address, too, to get rid of the corridor shame will be a distant memory. He echoed that again tonight. Is that something that you see the governor being able to accomplish?
Well, South Carolina has always been a tale of two interstates, the I-85 versus the I-95 corridor. And I think it's absolutely important that for that to happen, there are some things, key reform measures that need to be made. And I can tell you as a professional educator and someone who's dealt with this issue a long time, you know, it's going to take a little bit more than what I saw tonight. We need to flush out some things. Speaker of the House, he mentioned, and Senator Embry, he would work with them. I would hope that he would take advantage of the tremendous talent that we have on the Democratic side of the aisle, and particularly in the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, where we have educators, school board administrators, board members, and people who have dealt with this issue professionally for their careers. And let's sit down and see if we can have a dialogue of some substance and see if we can really make a difference.
It sounds like it might be going that way. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your input on this.
Thank you.
Let's go this way. And that concludes ETV and South Carolina Public Radio's live broadcast coverage of the governor's 2019 State of the State address. But ETV's coverage of the State House does not end here. You can listen to daily updates on South Carolina Public Radio every day. You can tune into the South Carolina Lead podcast every Tuesday, where I talk with the reporters who cover the State House. And of course, you can watch This Week in South Carolina every Friday evening at 7:30 on ETV. From all of us here at ETV and South Carolina Public Radio, I'm Gavin Jackson. Thanks for tuning in, and good night.